that it's our 30th anniversary.
Yay!
Wanted to invite Joy Waltermeyer from Long Live the Kings to this beautiful spot at Alderbrook on the water, where we're going to talk a little bit about our careers as fish women of Hood Canal.
Whoop whoop! I am the senior fish biologist for Long Live the Kings, and we have we're a pretty small organization, similar to your size, but we actually have a recovery conservation facility here on Hood Canal, as well as one up on Orcas Island, and then an office in Seattle. So we're kind of more spread out around the area, but I work primarily here in Hood Canal. And through the years, Mendy and I not only have worked together and become very passionate about Hood Canal, but have also become best friends. And we're so happy and lucky, and not only to live in this beautiful place and be able to explore the mountains and the rivers, but to have found a sisterhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And definitely rooted in this beautiful water and through these incredible salmon and steelhead that we work with.
And the community that we work in.
Absolutely,
too.
yeah.
So there's a lot of connections that we've created with people throughout the Hood Canal that are really cherished by me and cherished by Joy. It's such a lovely place, not just for the environment, but also for all the wonderful people who live here and work here as well. I grew up in Eastern Oregon in this little tiny, I don't want to call it podunk, but a tiny town in Eastern Oregon called Lakeview. And it was a cattle ranching and forestry community. And my dad worked for the Bureau of Land Management. So we landed there. He was district manager there for many years while I was growing up. But then I ended up migrating from there down to the University of Arizona in Tucson, where I got my degree in wildlife biology. So I mainly focused on birds in my undergraduate work, and loved being outside, learning about birds. But in Arizona, we didn't really have a lot of fish present that were native species. There were a lot of invasive species in that area, so I didn't really focus a lot on fish there. So when I graduated, I applied actually for an AmeriCorps position at the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group. And after that that year was over, I was offered a position with the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group doing like administrative work, which was just kind of a foot in the door, but it was a great way to get started.
And here you are now, with all your hard work and passion and dedication, the executive director. Kicking butt every day, getting things done, creating incredible community. Well, like you, not from Washington. I grew up in Connecticut on a horse farm and spent some time down with my grandparents in Florida, off the southwest coast of Florida, which is really the fish that I was connected with as a youngster. Spent all my time outside and with our horses and on our farm, and felt really blessed to kind of have that connection to land and place. Yeah, I remember the first fish I caught. I was probably, 5 maybe, and I was fishing off of my grandmother's dock and got a big fish. I was so excited and reeled it in, and it was a catfish. And she just looked at me like I had caught a big piece of garbage off the bottom of the ocean, and I was so proud of it. And she's like, "I'll throw it back." And I was like, "Okay." And because you don't have to keep fish all the time for it to be such an accomplishment. But it was a really great experience to see what was underneath the water's surface, and then from that point forward just got really into snorkeling and swimming and was always in the water. And I went to college in Philadelphia, and after a couple of years there playing volleyball and studying psychology, I was like, I'm not on the right course. And so I did a semester with the National Outdoor Leadership School, which I endorse fully for any person, whether it's a youngster or a grown-up, and really got connected to the wilderness and being a passionate impact-free, or as little impact as possible, user of the wilderness. So I transferred to Evergreen State College and graduated with a Bachelor of Science. And the day I was walking, I got an incredible offer to interview for a job with Long Live the Kings. And so what I thought was going to be a career in environmental ed and working with youth and connecting youth to place and creating that harmonious connection to place. I was like, I'll take a little detour, maybe a year or so, work for Long Live the Kings. And I'm going on, actually today is my 19th anniversary. I just realized that. How about that? So I feel very blessed to have found this organization, and even more so this place.
We have really three main areas of focus. So we are involved a lot in environmental education with schools and students. We have lots of field trips that we host. So that's kind of our one arm, which is education. And then we also are involved in a lot of research, and our biggest partner in research is Long Live the Kings, of course, and also work with Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA, on these research projects. But then the biggest part of what we do is habitat restoration and preservation. We do, a variety of projects for sure. Some are as small as culvert replacements, all the way up to larger estuary restoration projects. And I want to say that they're equally important. A culvert replacement may only be, a $300,000 project, but the impact that culvert replacement can have on a fish population is huge. So it's a big bang for your buck when you're talking about in-stream habitat. If culverts are undersized, oftentimes the water that passes through them will either be too fast during high flow events, so the water velocity through a small tube can be really high, and so the fish that are migrating upstream to spawn don't have the ability to get up into that culvert. But then during the summer times, when some fish live in streams for throughout summertime, so they need to be able to move from different places within a stream. So those culverts that are undersized or kind of perched up high, so they're high and dry, gives a lot less access to juvenile salmon to move from stream to stream or throughout a stream. So culvert replacements, even if they're just little culverts, can make a big impact on fish populations. Yeah. We also do a lot of larger estuary work. The most recent example of a completed project is just right down at the end of the canal, the Union River estuary, where the Salmon Center offices are located. We restored 31 acres of estuary habitat, which are really important waterways for juvenile salmon species that leave the river system earlier in their life history. So talking about, chum, summer chum, Chinook in some cases, though we don't have Chinook down in the Union River. But they really need that healthy estuary habitat to find cover from predators, as well as kind of have a place to go through that transition between the freshwater and the saltwater. They go through real physiological changes in order to be able to survive that transition. Yeah, there's 9 major estuaries in Hood Canal, and we've done a great job restoring the Union River estuary. Not fully. There are still some little pockets of habitat that could still be restored, but throughout the rest of the canal, we've got other big estuaries that we're working in right now, just in the planning stages, so that we can hopefully open up a lot more estuary habitat for many different fish species too. This year it's been really difficult with COVID to get my education staff involved with school children, and that's been a big blow to my education staff.
Yeah.
These are folks who are really passionate about interacting with kids and helping to form these young folks into environmental stewards, and it's been really difficult to have that connection lost this year. But we've been, I'm really proud of them because they've been focusing more on online resources for kids. We know that there are kids out there who are really excited about learning outside of the box. You know, there's our education in our school systems doesn't always cover things that that all kids find interesting. Lots of kids like to learn about,
Right.
you know, the water and the birds and the plants around them. So it's, you know, I'm really proud that our education staff has really focused a lot on that online learning and trying to work with school districts to get our online learning opportunities integrated into their curriculum.
In my son's primary school here in Shelton, you know, that time of year comes and there's a tank that your crew brings into the school, and every morning as the kids are passing, or throughout the day as they're passing throughout the hallways, they can watch the eggs develop, these embryos develop and hatch, and then know that after watching the fish swim around for a bit, the tank is gone, and that's because they've been released and gone home,
Right.
and gone to make this big journey out. And so when you see that as any age, but especially as a child, you really, I mean, it really connects the next generation to that place
Yeah.
too.
And part of that program too, that's called Salmon in the Classroom. And part of that program too is that kids get to actually put their little fish in a cup and go release it into the stream close by. So it's a
really
really good
awesome.
program. So they get to also learn about what is healthy habitat for juvenile salmon when, you know, it's in stream.
So we've had a similar connection with you through our Survive the Sound, which is a game that Long Live the Kings has developed, and essentially it's a virtual game that tracks an actual data set through these juvenile steelhead that we've acoustically tagged, and can actually track their migration out of Hood Canal. And you know, we've had hundreds of thousands of participants over the last few years, and it continues to increase exponentially every year. But a huge piece of that are classrooms and students and wonderful teachers that have committed to this curriculum around using salmon. Really is such a learning point. So while our organizations are similar and overlap, we also have our differences, and
Yeah.
I think that's what makes you know, Hood Canal and Puget Sound all the better, because we're able to approach the ecosystem with many different strengths and tools to help not only the fish but also the community. Long Live the Kings is a lot more maybe research or experimentation, but also a lot of facilitating. So working directly with managers and co-managers both in the United States and now in Canada, having these conversations around the health and well-being of our salmon and their ecosystem. I mean, going from zooplankton up to orcas. So it's all connected, and even though we're not in the water with them, we are very much connected as well. So in your opinion, what do you see as sort of, let's speak directly to Hood Canal, as the threats to salmon?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest threat in my mind is climate change. So we've got major changes happening slowly over time, but it seems more rapidly recently, where we've got, you know, in the past we had the watersheds along the west side of the Hood Canal were primarily like snow-driven watersheds. So there would be times when all of that water was locked up in snow and would only start to melt in the springtime, creating these flows in the springtime for salmon to utilize. And now we've got these systems where we'll have big, like heavy, warm rain events happening throughout the winter, where a lot of that snowpack melts and heads out at the wrong time. And then also we have many summers in recent history where we've just had incredible droughts. So winters where we didn't get nearly as much snow in the mountains as we needed to maintain really that healthy ecosystem and that snow-driven watershed. On the east side of the canal, we have more spring-fed streams. So they aren't driven by snowpack. They're more driven by rain events. And in those watersheds, when we get those big flood events, there's just major impacts to the actual stream bed itself, just because there's mass wasting of sediment and transport downstream, burying salmon redds. And these are events that have been happening more frequently than they did in the past.
I mean, we think like the last 3 years we've had two 500-year events and one 100-year events, and that's an incredible impact. Right. Yeah. That's one thing actually we're going to be focusing on over the next probably 5 or 10 years out of Lilywop, where Long Live the Kings has our conservation facility, is partnering with a Portland State University doctor and some staff and looking at the effects actually of fire. There was a fire both in the Hamma Hamma and the Duckabush some years ago, and looking at the effects of fire and then how it affects the snowpack and essentially the freshwater availability to one metric we'll look at will be salmon. And so, looking at the effects of these fires too, I mean, it's our water supply we're talking about, and moving forward, it is something that's going to affect more than just the fish.
Right.
So it is that system-wide, view and vision that we all need to keep in mind moving forward. And while our organizations really focus on salmon, we're connected to the snowpack and the headwaters, and like I said before, the whales out in the ocean. So
right. One really neat thing that happened this summer was that the Orcas came down into Hood Canal again and that's not a super frequent event. It used to happen almost every year, and it's been happening less often over the last several decades.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, it's an indicator of an indication that maybe there's not the same food availability, or potentially if it was the transient whales that we would have come down and they would forage on the seals and the sea lions, which have no predators here in Hood Canal. And so as we talk about threats, I mean, the predation is huge. If, for those of you who don't know, there's about, let's say an average, a salmon will lay 3,000 eggs in a red when they come back to spawn. Right, so they're born in the river, they're teeny tiny, like Mendy was saying. As they leave, they use their estuaries, get a little stronger, migrate out to the ocean, return back after 3 or 4 years, depending on the species on average, and spawn back in the river where they came from. And of those 3,000 eggs that they lay, less than 0.5% of that number will return back as adults to spawn. And so that's very low survival. Of the juveniles that are leaving the canal, once they make it out to the canal, there's a huge impediment here in Hood Canal, and that's the Hood Canal floating bridge. We identified this as a problem in the Hood Canal Steelhead project, which both of our organizations partner with NOAA and Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Skokomish Tribe, Port Gamble-Sklallam Tribe. It's an incredible partnership. And I think the success of that program is in part because we have such an incredibly strong partnership. In that project, we were tagging juvenile steelhead smolts. And so a steelhead, unlike the chum or chinook that are leaving as either a few months old or 6 months old, they actually spend about 2 years in the freshwater. So they really need a healthy river system, which is where your habitat work and other habitat work really shines. But as these steelhead are leaving the rivers, we were catching them in a trap and implanting them with small tags so we could track their migration through the river, through Hood Canal, and out into the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And found that 50% of those steelhead smolts were having a mortality event at the Hood Canal floating bridge. And so Long Live the Kings and NOAA and some other folks got together to do this Hood Canal bridge assessment. And through this 2-year assessment, collecting all different data and using so many tags and so many data points, and a big shout out to Megan Moore at NOAA for sitting through thousands upon thousands of data points and making this story comprehensible to us, have found that 50% of the steelhead are dying at the bridge. And that's just the steelhead. I mean, we still have yet to identify what the loss is for chum or chinook or other species. But, you know, the bridge floats about 15 feet down in Hood Canal, and there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of lights. But in that 15-foot water column, that's the depth that the fish are migrating out of the canal in. And so they're essentially swimming along and hitting a wall. And that wall is the pontoon sort of create corners, and the extreme tidal force in Hood Canal is affected, let alone, like I said, the noise from the bridge and the lights. But the seals and other marine mammals and marine birds have honed into this as
a great place to have
all
supper.
You can eat buffet. Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, as technology continues to advance and we can implement those new technologies, we found that, you know, we have temperature tags and depth tags, and so can really get a good snapshot of what in fact is actually eating these fish.
Yeah.
And a huge piece of that are the seals.
A lot of our estuaries have been have created more channelized river systems, so where the fresh water enters into the salt water. In a lot of places along the canal, those systems are very restricted and constrained. So it's a very narrow water column in which fish get to migrate in and out of these river systems that, you know, used to be, you know, hundreds of acres, and now they've been confined to a, you know, 20-foot wide swath through the estuary that's got levees on both sides. So those also create places where predators can have their fill of fish moving in and out of the freshwater system.
I was hired on to be the steelhead biologist for Long Live the Kings, in what started off as the Hama Hama Steelhead Project. And so essentially that project was in partnership with NOAA and the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Skokomish tribe and the Canal Salmon Enhancement Group. And we would go out, these are runs of steelhead in Hood Canal that were on what was called an extinction vortex, and so essentially they were forecasted to go extinct within, you know, a generation or two. And so intervention was taken before they were listed on the ESA list as threatened species, to remove embryos from the river that wild fish had spawned, and use the hatchery, like we were talking about before, to boost that survival. And then there were two different strategies. One was to release them as smolts, at which point they go out to the ocean, saltwater for a couple of years and grow, and then return back to their river to spawn. And then the second was to raise the fish until they were adults, at which point they would be ready to spawn and put right back into the river. So that project was showing an increase of survival and is also genetic diversity, which is one piece of this experiment that was being tested, was how using a hatchery would affect the genetic viability of these populations and diversity. And so that was expanded to the Hood Canal Steelhead Project. And so we began supplementing, so using the same protocol and methods in the Dewatto River here on the east side of Hood Canal, the South Fork Skokomish River, and the Duckabush River. Along that same time, we continued to monitor the genetics and the population of the rivers around Hood Canal as our control streams. And we found in those treatment streams that, you know, the genetic diversity and numbers were increasing both during the project and once the project in the Hama stopped, in the Hama as well, just naturally sustaining themselves. So for me, you know, my day-to-day between January and June is being out on the rivers. I get to walk the rivers. There's a lot of hook and line sampling that was occurring to try to catch adults, as well as snorkel surveys. And, you know, there's something about not only being able to work in one of the most beautiful places in the world, but to be able to be so intimately connected with these runs of fish. And so for me, I think that really is my favorite part of the job, is to be in the river, miles away from a road or any other human, see elk and bear and cougar and whatever else. But to be able to really see what the fish are doing, what the rivers that they're in, the habitat that they use, the obstacles at each river or each year, whether it's flow or the lack of rain or too many floods or whatever it might be, and really to see that and to feel it and live it, and then to take that to this bigger picture that we're talking about. The work that both of our organizations have done with summer chum in Hood Canal has been very rewarding, and that the numbers were also again on the verge of extinction or going to plummet, and over years of supplementation we've been able to build those numbers back up, and the supplementation has since stopped, and now we're in this period to sort of assess what the health of these stocks are. So it's really nice to have not only the time but also the duration of time, I should say, to make these observations and be involved in this place, but also to have just that intimate connection. And whether it's from hiking in the summertime up to the mountain peaks, or taking our kids camping or kayaking, whatever it might be in the canal. I mean, it's in our hearts. It's definitely who I think we both have. We've migrated home, and here we are, and this is where I hope to never leave. And I hope that both personally, myself, and then our organization, Long Live the Kings, and the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group can continue to partner and, essentially assist, but enhance the state and the federal and the tribal co-managers, and that we can really see that we're all in this together, and we need to have that collective, cooperative approach. I mean, I feel very lucky to be so intimately involved with the fish, because we raise fish at our conservation facility, and we're doing so now the same methods that we did for the Hood Canal Steelhead project, for Tacoma Power, for the North Fork of the Skokomish. And so it's nice to continue to build upon this work that has such great integrity and really complements our conservation and recovery efforts so well, and implement these projects in other watersheds for a short amount of time, because we don't want to have species and stocks of fish dependent upon humans. We essentially, our job, right, is to put ourselves out of business and
totally
and create help to create as healthy an ecosystem for all the creatures to thrive in. And so I think it's going to take our continued sisterhood. Thank goodness we like each other, and we love each other's organizations, and we appreciate our community, and we appreciate our board of directors. We appreciate
volunteers,
absolutely, and the youth that are involved, and we really look forward to working together until we're sitting in our little kayaks here, retired, and just enjoying hopefully the fruits of our labors.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.